Let's get right to it. TFC taking on New York City FC Wednesday. We know the success TFC has had there over the last few games that they played going back to the playoffs. But right now, New York City FC, I believe, is someone the TFC have to take seriously this time around, unlike last year where they're firing on all cylinders. David Vieira is on a mission this year. Patrick Vieira is now a guy that I believe is starting to open up a lot of eyes, even overseas, for him to go back at the end of the season with the great work he's done. Talk to us about it.
Well, what I really like about New York City FC, like you said, they've come in on a mission, and I think they've had these dates with TFC circled on the calendar. We remember that, you know, they were just humiliated at Yankee Stadium, and I don't think any of us that have been following TFC could have, you know, expected that 5-0 result. And when that happens, it's obviously great in the time, but the first question that was asked of Greg Vanney today at training was, you know, are you expecting a team with a chip on their shoulder? Because that's the kind of, you know, that's the kind of team that they should be expecting. This is a team that was humiliated, and now you have a TFC that, let's face it, it's a depleted lineup. And the other thing that New York City FC has done, they've improved defensively. I mean, TFC just exposed their weak back line last year in their playoff series, and they just steamrolled them. And now you have a team that's really solid on offense. And yeah, so they've got TFC twice in the next week and a half. I mean, this is a real opportunity for them to make a serious push, you know, with a depleted lineup. And I think if you're Greg Vanney, you are taking this game as seriously, if not more seriously, than any game, even more serious than perhaps the Montreal games. You know, you have to be taking these games very, very seriously with regards to the regular season.
And if you're Patrick Vieira, Joshua, I'd play TFC like I played them the first game of that playoff, home and home here in Toronto, where I was in that press box, and I looked over to a couple guys and I said, you know what? I have a feeling the New York City FC, if they play like this in the second leg at home, could go on to the next round. They played him physical. They played him tough. They got into the grill house of each and every player of TFC. They weren't afraid, and it was a real entertaining match.
Yeah, it was, and that's the kind of soccer that TFC can offer. It's always entertaining. I mean, we don't need to go that far back to the Canadian Championship. That was some of the most thrilling soccer we've seen, well, I guess since the last time that they've played Montreal. And yeah, that's what I think we should expect. Now, with regards to TFC losing or not having possibly up to 7 players, they got Raheem Edwards back today. And that's definitely up the entertainment factor. But what you're going to have to see is you're going to see players step up. And in that regard, you're going to see probably the debut of Nicholas Hassler, you know, the new Liechtenstein international that they brought in. Not necessarily the most entertaining player, Oyvind Alseth as well, who's played, I think, pretty well, you know, in right back for the injured Stephen Beitashour. Also not a remarkably entertaining player. So perhaps what TFC does is they draw back into a 4-4-2, a more conservative, you know, approach, and really try to wear them down. So yeah, I expect New York City FC to come out, you know, guns a-blazing, but I also know that TFC, as we've seen a few times this season, they do have the ability to really wear down an opponent with a kind of a rope-a-dope approach where they sit back. And it's good to see them do that because you can't play sexy soccer all the time. So it'll be interesting to see the balance that they put out.
Now, a couple more minutes before we let you go, Joshua. You mentioned Nicholas Hassler. I tweeted that out exclusively when it was made official. We knew that this guy was going to bring a lot of steadiness. He's physical, and I'm going to warn TFC supporters now, he's not flashy. He's not one of these guys that's got blazing speed, but he is a workaholic type of player. He'll give you everything out there, and he is tailored, I believe, for MLS because this is the type of player you want in the stretches and in situations like this where they're depleted. Let's talk about TFC too, Joshua, and I'm hoping that some of the guys that have really impressed in a real bad season that they've had can be brought up and given another look because right now, as you said, they're depleted. Altidore gone, Bradley gone, Raheem comes back. But still, they don't have the weapons they had off the bench as they did 3 or 4 games ago. Hagelin coming back, hopefully, on and on. It's important, I believe, to bring up some guys from TFC too.
A guy that I would kind of keep an eye on is Brandon Aubrey. I mean, he was their first-round draft pick. and he's a player that hasn't really cracked in. Some might say he's not ready yet, but you've got a stretch of games coming up, particularly the one against Colorado, a home game where you not necessarily as strong an opponent as New York City FC. So that's a guy that I could see maybe working his way in, because it's again I maintain that if they're going to be without Bradley, Altidore, and Morrow, you're gonna see them probably playing a flat four in the back, and he's a player that could get a chance. Vanny said as much today. He said right now there's a lot of players in contention for that lineup, and he didn't really seem too sure. I mean, perhaps he is, but he didn't seem too sure as if he knew who that lineup would be. So it's given the injuries and given the kind of tight turnover that they've had in some games, it's often a real guessing game with regards to the lineup that Vanny fields. It's always that talking point up to the hour before the match who he's going to field. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a player like him. But yeah, I think you're right. At this point, it's kind of fair game, isn't it? They have a bit of a cushion with regards to the standings. So why not see what you have? I wouldn't do it against New York City, but against the Colorado, why not see what you have, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Joshua, just before I let you go, really appreciate your time. Very quickly, Wednesday, New York City FC, David Vieira, and obviously Sebastian Giovinco for TFC. And I've been thinking about this up to the lead up of this match. I think, honestly, my heart of hearts, that these are the two best players we have seen in MLS, bar none. And I believe we're not going to see two players of this quality and this caliber for maybe another 5 to 10 years come to MLS. Maybe I'm crazy, but I believe that. And these two players have electrified, MLS, their clubs, their fans, everything. I think it's going to be great.
Yeah, I do too. You know what? I was quite critical early on in the season of Seba because his numbers were down. He to the eye test he looked off, but you can't really quantify that. A lot of his kind of periphery stats were down, his key passes, that kind of thing. And I think, like I said, if you looked, you would just say he just doesn't look off. But in the last month, he has elevated his game to where he was in 2015, and it's been absolutely remarkable to see him just take TFC on his back at times, and that's something that you need. I mean, he's a special player. He's a player that kind of writes his own rules, and to see him do that, TFC need him at their absolute best, and so that's what's really impressed me about Seb, is that he hasn't let it go all season, this kind of slight dip in form that we saw early in the season. We know he was battling injuries, but he turned a corner, and that's what great players do. Great players just rebound. They admit, they find another gear inside themselves. So yeah, it's just been incredible to see. And you know what? Seba loves playing in New York. Seba loves these big stages. So I expect a really, really big game from him on Wednesday.
Wouldn't it be crazy, quickly, Joshua, to see these two square off against each other, or maybe even on the bench, Italy and Spain, a World Cup qualifier on September 2nd? These two players haven't gotten the respect since they've come here for both of their nations, respectively. I think that they deserve the respect to be called up at least to be on the bench for this big matchup, because I believe the amount of games they've played, and they're in full form, unlike the Spanish and the Italian players that only have maybe 2 or 3 games under their belt. These guys will have 15, 20 games under their belt, Joshua.
Yeah, well, I guess the onus then is on the trainers and the coaches of the Spanish and Italian national teams to take a look at MLS, because frankly, I don't believe they do, and I don't want to be an MLS cheerleader here, but the thing that I've seen is the adjustment the players have to make, and the physical style of play that is so dominant in MLS. That hardens a player, and that makes a player better for big games. And yeah, absolutely, because like you said, there's been no real serious dip in form for both of these players. And you can say everything you want about MLS, but it's the kind of league that not only big older names are coming to. You see the kind of quality that's developing through MLS. We don't need to go very far, to look at Alphonso Davies. If you have players, or if you have coaches in and around Europe that are saying, well, who's this Alphonso Davies kid? You also have to look at the elite of the elite, and that's your David Villas and your Sebastian Giovincos. Obviously, I think it would be, well earned for both of those players to earn another call up on the bench, maybe. But I think MLS definitely deserves more eyes on these national team trainers.
Well said, Joshua. We really appreciate you making time. As we let you go, where can people read your stuff again? How much is it per month? And give us your Twitter handle.
So again, we're at theathletic.com/Toronto. Really appreciate any TFC readers, because we're really doing our best to get TFC off the ground. And what you're going to get is very, very different content than in any of the the other big sites. And of course, I'm a big fan of anybody that covers TFC full time. But you're going to get a lot of features. You're going to get a lot of work with numbers and and a lot of stats that you might not see otherwise. So that's theathletic.com/Toronto. I believe it's around $5 or $6 a month. We've always got promos going on, and you can check me out on Twitter at Joshua Kloke, Kloke.
Outstanding. Joshua, thanks so much for making time. Keep up the great work, and we'll see you in the box in the next home game for TFC, my friend.
Anytime. Thanks again.